We've seen this story before. Every major information monopoly that's been erected in the last century has come to a point where they truly believe, they conceive of themselves as champions of innovation. And two examples that come to mind, when AT&T in the 1970s and 1980s was under antitrust investigation, and also Microsoft 2 decades later when they were under investigation, they loudly proclaimed that they were the champions of innovation, when in fact, what was masked was decades of stagnation and a lack of innovation. And the minute that those companies were thwarted in their ambitions to become monopolies or to maintain their monopoly, a torrent of new innovation broke forth. We saw a tremendous surge of new ideas come forth. Now remember, Microsoft at one point was actually putting out, they're the masters of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And they were putting out this message that open source software was somehow akin to communism. Honestly, this was like an official message. This poster, this is a joke about that. But they did their level best to say, look, that new thing that's coming, that's scary and bad. And we're the defenders of the freedom. We're the defenders of the innovation here. You've got to trust us. We know what we're doing. My suggestion is think twice about that before you accept that. Because there's something else happening. There's another alternative architecture out there. And it's an architecture that Tim O'Reilly, the creator of the Web 2.0 conference, a publishing company, Tim O'Reilly coined the term architecture participation to describe the internet. And this is a very important term because really this is the single characteristic that makes the internet so very different from telecommunications networks and cable networks and other types of networks. It's a network that was built from the ground up by communal activities, the participation of millions of people, of initially hundreds of scientists, but then gradually over time, literally millions of people have added to this. Everyone is able to participate to the level that they're able, the level that they desire. It's built on a system of openness. Open software standards, open APIs, open platforms, and open source software that allow people to freely innovate on top of it, to contribute back to the community what they've created. This is completely different from the architecture of coercion, where it's private infrastructure driven by investment seeking an ROI. Here you have an architecture that's designed for people to collaborate for the accretion of knowledge that is shared by all. It's a revolutionary new economic concept. Now, this is the part of the speech where normally I would say to you, let's look at Wikipedia, or let's look at a social game, or let's talk about social networking or something. But there's just such a fantastic example that just comes to us from the last 4 weeks of activity in the Middle East, and it continues to this very day. It's in the headlines every single day. That shows you the power when you create an open network that everyone can be a participant in. It shows you what can happen. This is a picture from Egypt, from Tahrir Square in Cairo. Now, there's been a lot of chatter about social media, and I know you've seen the press reports about how the Tunisian revolution was the WikiLeaks revolution, the Egyptian demonstrations were powered by social media and so forth. But I want you to look closely at these photographs. You're going to notice people are holding something. I don't mean the baby in blue or the flags, but check out what people are holding. In every one of these photos, you can sort of see it. Apart from the people holding flags, you'll see people holding up things. Here you see it very clearly. Okay, some people are waving shoes. That's in the Middle East a way of showing disrespect. Here they're talking about Mubarak, and they're waving shoes. But everyone else is holding a camera phone. And here you can see it quite clearly, camera phones. Now, this isn't unique to Egypt. This is true at every public event that you go to. You'll see that in the crowd, there's this new kind of gesture where people are standing there. And if you're in the back of the crowd, you'll see thousands of people holding up cameras, taking photos. And if today, and here they are, quite expressly, if you missed it, if you didn't get the headline, they're telling you how they're organizing this thing. They're telling each other how to organize. These are spray-painted signs from slogans from the people who are demonstrating in Cairo, talking about Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. These are the tools they use to organize. It's sort of an interesting thing, right? A leaderless group that emerges, that dynamically, autonomously organizes itself using social media tools. Hitherto unknown, brand new concept for this century. If you go to Google and you search Egypt, Tahrir Square, you'll find that there are 23 million photos uploaded. That's the power of lots and lots and lots of people taking lots and lots and lots of photos. And as I say, that's happening again and again and again. The economics of this architecture are the economics of abundance. Now, the architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe once said, architecture is the will of the age expressed in spatial terms. The will of the age. And when I talk about an architecture of coercion versus an architecture of participation, this is what I'm talking about. We're at a time in this second century of electronic media where we're going to make a decision about which architecture we want to live in. Do we want to live with an architecture that invites us all in to participate, to consume how we wish to consume, to set our own standards for how we wish to operate these services, enjoy these services, package them and access them and share them and talk about them and market them, or do we wish to live in a world of closed architectures where it's controlled end to end, where a single company can determine what you get to watch and when you get to watch it? Which architecture best expresses the will of our era, the architecture of coercion or the architecture of cooperation? Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to move through this slide fairly quickly, but let me talk about a few key points. How can you distinguish between the two? Well, I look at business plans every day from new companies, and very quickly I can discern, using this grid, I can discern whether we're talking about an old school business or a new school business. Because an old school business is going to try to talk about monetization, revenue maximization. A new school business is going to talk about how can we get to explosive audience growth. And a network that enables a one-way broadcast, or any system that enables push out, publishing out, that's old school. New school, it's about creating a dialogue where the consumer gets to participate in a conversation on an equal level with the publisher of the content or the creator of the content. That's a revolutionary thought, and that's as challenging to content creators as it is to traditional publishers. The value drivers in old school businesses in the coercive model are all about scarcity, shelf space, slotting fees. You know, it's a little bit like a grocery store. You need to buy an end cap if you want to bring your new product into that store. And the value driver in the architecture of cooperation is that of abundance and ubiquity, getting your content out there everywhere, not necessarily monetizing it, making it freely available so that you can garner bigger attention, actually giving people ways to share it and talk about it as well so that they spread it around. I talked a little bit about the open source standards and how that's different from closed proprietary platforms. I've talked a little bit about on-demand and how that's different from rigorously scheduled programming. But if we move a little bit further down, you see toward the bottom, the control in this new paradigm is set by the consumer themselves. The audience role in this new paradigm is one of a connected participant whose opinions and voice count. And the retention mechanism in this new paradigm is one of loyalty and convenience instead of coercion, lock-in, contracts, and termination penalties. Now, this makes the internet a difficult place to do business. Paradoxically, even though it's wide open, it's a ruthlessly competitive marketplace for new ideas, and that's why it's so innovative. That's why we're seeing such great examples of innovation happening every single day, this blistering pace of innovation, because it's such a ruthlessly efficient mechanism for exchanging new ideas. Kevin Kelly, who writes about technology, he's the executive editor of Wired magazine, he said this, a very good point for the new century that we're in. Don't seek refuge in scarcity. Far greater wealth will be created by exploiting the plentitude. That is a great watchword for us in this era. When people focus on scarcity, when people focus on control, when people focus on trying to contain everything inside of their platform, where they control it end to end, they're looking in the rear view mirror, to use Marshall McLuhan's terms. Now let's take a look at the economics of abundance. So you've heard about Facebook's incredible growth, and even here, this diagram is from June, when they broached the 500 million member mark, but now they're at the 600 million member mark. Do you know how many photos are uploaded to Facebook every month? Anyone have an idea of that? Anyone want to know? I'll spare you the guessing game. 3 billion photos a month are uploaded to Facebook. 3 billion photos. Last year, in 2010, 30 billion photos were uploaded to Facebook. That makes it by far the largest collection of photos on the planet. And there's no sign that this is going to slow down. If anything, it's continuing to accelerate. There are over 2 billion mobile devices in the world that have a camera inside of them. So there's a whole generation coming now that's growing up with the idea that they can take photos and shoot video and share it anywhere they want to. Of course, another thing that's driving this is the incredibly low cost of content creation. It simply removed the barriers to those who wish to create content. Flip cameras now cost $125. This is cheap. You know, when I was a kid, if you wanted to make a movie, you had to rent a 16 millimeter or 8 millimeter camera. You had to go get the film. You had to develop the film. This was a tremendous challenge, and it actually cost real money. Today, it's trivial. It's built into your iPhone. And as a result, in another brilliant example of the economics of abundance, you can see that YouTube is getting 35 hours of video uploaded every minute of every day. 35 hours of video. A day and a half worth of video is uploaded to YouTube every single minute. If you come from the traditional media business, this is confounding. Because in television, if we wish to grow the number of programs, Well, we have to hire additional producers. If we wish to add new channels, we have to invest and build a whole new channel. In other words, we grow our businesses in a linear fashion. But on the web, in broadband, content creation is growing exponentially fast. Now, those in the traditional media business have a habit of thinking of their digital departments, their digital divisions, as sort of this small thing, an afterthought, an ancillary business, sort of a cut-down version of what we really do, which is television. I want to challenge you about that because actually those things are changing very, very quickly as well. In the past, it's true, internet companies were smaller, internet companies were generating less revenue. But that's changing very, very quickly. If you read the blog of the CEO of Hulu, Jason Kilar, you'll see a very interesting analysis of how they're able to monetize on that new video service on the web at a rate that's approaching broadcast television. And I had this experience myself where we were able to sell video on the web at a CPM that rivaled broadcast television rates. So for the right kind of content, the economics are starting to approach those of broadcast television. And this is in a very short period of time. Check out this diagram. We have two pictures, two different pie charts, both of almost equal value. The new media companies on the left and the old media businesses on the right. These are the biggest players in both categories. Note that the one on the left doesn't include Microsoft or Apple. It literally just includes the content companies and the companies that are advertising based. They're equal now. But the momentum, the growth momentum, is clearly on the left side of the diagram. Here's another very ugly chart from Morgan Stanley. But a very useful chart for us. Look at this. They're showing how advertising revenue versus time spent is out of whack. And Mary Meeker, who's been putting this material together for the last 10 years, she brings this up every time she gives a talk. She talks about how advertisers value, when they talk about how they reach people in the home, they're putting more value on traditional media. They haven't quite caught up with the consumer. The consumer's migrated over to these new digital platforms, and so there's growth potential. I circled on the right the growth potential, which is that the internet now is closing in on television in terms of time spent by consumers, but the advertising dollars haven't quite got there. So in the previous slide, I showed you how the valuation of these two companies is neck and neck, but I think there's actually even more growth potential that lies ahead for us for these new broadband-based, online-based businesses because there's a tremendous untapped opportunity here. As more dollars migrate out of those traditional fields into new media, you're going to find that the valuations of those businesses continue to go up. In closing, let me give you 5 trends for the future. I want to end this on a hopeful note, and I'm a big believer in television, but I believe television needs to embrace the social web and work collaboratively in this new construct in order to survive and thrive in the next century. Let me give you 5 quick trends. The first one is audience as data. One of the reasons the internet is now starting to catch up and pressure traditional media in terms of advertising is its ability to deliver ads in real time. This shift happened in the last 2 years. Real-time delivery of advertising is incredibly powerful. It's what sets the web apart. It's why a two-way network is optimal for reaching audiences. Real-time delivery means that you don't have to buy content as a proxy for audience. You can actually buy audience. And companies like Visual DNA, in full disclosure, a company that I'm on the board of directors of, companies like these are helping publishers understand their audience in new ways so that when their salespeople go out and talk to advertisers, they don't have to sell the sports section and the home section and the news section and so forth. They can actually sell segmented audience, and you can see some of the audience types there on the left side. This is extraordinarily powerful technology. Now, I think it's important for broadcasters to understand this. Addressability is something that cable operators have been telling us about for 20 years. They've done absolutely nothing to deliver it. But we're approaching a time now where audiences are migrating from platform to platform. And if you use your digital media businesses to start to garner a better understanding of who your customer actually is, you're going to be able to sell that customer at a higher CPM to an advertiser. And you're going to deliver more value to that advertiser at a higher price because, in fact, you're going to start to help them make their advertising more effective. They're going to deliver the right ad to the right person at the right moment. That's the power of the two-way network.